I'm going to talk about how you get a book publishing deal from a major publisher. The first thing I have to say is this is anecdotal. My first book was published in 2005, I believe. So this took place a while ago. And admittedly, the publishing world has changed, but we'll talk about that a little bit. And also, it's anecdotal. It's to me. It's what I did. That doesn't mean it's what you'll do. Other people have used other methods. However, even though the publishing world has changed, and it is both easier and more difficult to be published, easier because there's so many digital press and self-publishing options that are effective and can be good. More difficult in that major publishers are trying to find their way in this digital world. But either way, I think the strategies I employed are still very effective today, and not only for book publishing, they're effective for music, for art, and even for consulting. There's strategies I'm going to cover that I think are relevant and can be used today. So if you want to get published, if you want to get your first article published or get paid to write, these are some things I employed that proved to be very effective. And a big piece of the name of the game is just flexibility and awareness as to what's going on. Take advantage of the right opportunities. And so the first thing I'm going to say is be good or get gooder. And what I mean by that is I've been writing my entire life. I've always been very good at it. It's always been something I've been encouraged to do by teachers all the way back to elementary school. I wrote stories and essays and poems, whatever. I always had a notepad with me. My good friends from high school remember me walking around with a pad of paper that I was always writing something in. And so if you want to be a writer, you need to write. Stephen King has the book on writing, which I highly recommend. And he says, read a lot and write a lot. And those are two things that I did. I kind of like to read more these days. I'm not reading as much as I would like to, but it's something I did all the time. And so you have to be an effective writer. There's no getting around that. The second thing is get an early win. Now, what that meant for me is, I'd gone a lot of years not writing. I had started consulting, started programming, went to work for a large company, and then started consulting. And it was a couple of years into that I realized I hadn't been writing, and that was always something I wanted to do. So when I say pick an early win, I picked a small local newspaper, the Warner Center News, this in Woodland Hills, California, and I published a personal interest piece on hiking, and it was like 500 words. I pitched it to them. They said they'd love to see it. It included a picture of my family hiking out in Chatsworth, and just where we were hiking and why it was interesting. I didn't get paid for that, but wow, was it encouraging. I saw my name in press, it listed my email address, gave me a little byline, very encouraging. And then I published a second piece with them on some friends of mine who are actors. They had some event coming up, and so I covered their event that they were doing, another personal interest piece, and once again, very encouraging. So then I sat down and I was reading a technology magazine that that came out every month, and I had an idea for an article. And this was at the time of the dot-com bust. So after the dot-com boom, the dot-com bust, technologists were saying that every job is going away to India, and the IT field was dead. And I didn't believe that. I believed that the IT field needed a reboot because it hadn't delivered during the dot-com boom era. It hadn't delivered, and it had left a bad taste in people's mouths. So I wrote an article titled "Why Technologists Must Learn to Speak Business." And that's a common theme that I say all the time with my career advice is, if you're an IT professional, you need to speak in terms of the businesses that you serve. Either way, that's what the article was about. And I sent it off to this technology magazine. Well, it turns out they had 3 magazines around the country. And 2 weeks after they got the article, the editor called me and they bumped their front page article on all 3 magazines and ran mine as the lead article. And then and I got paid. So, wow, once again, really encouraging, spurred me on for the next thing. They also offered me a career column. So for a year, I wrote a career column, similar attitude-driven career advice. And then I got published in the Wall Street Journal's Career Journal. I got published in Windows Professional magazine for some scripting and automation. And then I ended up getting paid to write for a number of magazines and other publications, all very encouraging. At that time, I was taking part in a series of online forums. And one particular forum, they had a career section, and people would ask questions. Should I get a certification? Should I get a degree? My boss is doing this. Should I ask for a raise? Whatever the case was. And so I was offering advice, and it got to where people really enjoyed the advice I was giving. And so they would respond to other people, and they'd tag me, and they'd say, you should ask Matt. He'll give you some good advice. And so I was responding to people's various questions about a variety of topics. Could be resume or cover letter or whatever. And every time I'd respond, I would copy that response into a document. So that's another piece of advice. Keep track of what you write because you may want to use it later. And so I had this big tome, this big document with all these categorized responses. And at one point I said, and I approached the community and I said, hey, would you like a toolkit of sorts? I'll take all this and organize it, put it into a PDF, and I'll publish it for free. And I got overwhelming responses, 50, 60, 70 people writing me or responding to the thread that we were on. And so I produced that. And I just kept adding to it, and I'd republish it and say, oh, look, I've updated it, and people would download it. And suddenly I realized I had over 200 pages of information. And I thought to myself, this is a book. I'd accidentally written a book. And so I approached a big publisher in San Francisco, and they came back and they said they wanted to publish it. So now this is really important. I have not seen a rejection slip for articles, for anything. My first book right away got published. So I don't think that's normal, but I'm certainly grateful for that. However, this publisher couldn't do my book for 14 months. And I was already speaking at various colleges, and University of Phoenix had me speaking a number of times on careers in technology, and I wanted a product. And so I turned down the publishing deal, which I don't recommend to anyone, but for me it was the right choice. I turned down the deal, and I just went to a digital press, not a self-publishing outfit. I just went to a printer. I created my own cover, created my own back, inside of the cover, and then I put together my own books on a digital press. And I started selling them on my website. But I wasn't getting a lot of traffic to the website, and I wanted to increase my traffic, and this is the important lesson. One of the things you have to be willing to do for the right opportunity is trade pay for opportunity. And this, a lot of artists struggle with. Oh, you shouldn't write for free. You shouldn't play music for free. You shouldn't. But I consult for free all the time. I consult to prove my value. I consult to move into a new area of consulting. And I'll give some free information to a small business, limited amount, but I always try and make sure I assess whether it has value coming back. And that's the important part of this. I'm not telling people, play for exposure at some place that nobody shows up to. There's no point to. I don't tell people, write for some publication, unless you need to practice, write for some publication that has no eyes on it, that has no value to you. Why do that? You can find a place that has value. So I'm not saying without some kind of intelligence and strategy to do things for free, but I'm just simply saying you have to take advantage of the opportunities. Now look, if you can be paid to write from out of the gate and get both pay and the exposure, great. But in light of what I know about most people struggling to break into the writing arena and music and consulting, they run into the same problem. They're unknown, and if you're unknown, you're not relevant. You just don't. You might be writing the greatest stuff, but if nobody knows about you, you're gonna have to do something to build the credibility. And so what I did is I approached the magazine that was publishing my career column, and I said, look, stop paying me. I don't want you to pay me anymore, but I do want you to do a full or a half-page ad in your magazine, and I want a banner ad on your website. And I want the half-page ad, and I got this advice from Eric Tracy, so I'm very thankful to him. I don't want the half-page ad in the back, where all the ads are. I want it to be opposite an article. So I was getting the exposure from my article and my byline going to my website. I was getting a half-page ad opposite another article that somebody might be reading, and I had a banner ad on their website, all linking back to my first website. And on that website, I had a PayPal button. I think it was PayPal. It's all I didn't have a shopping cart, and they could buy a book. And I started selling copies of it. I also went to another website, techies.com at the time. They're now defunct. They were a job site for technology professionals. And I'd noticed that their career advice was never changing. It was always the same. And so I said, man, they need content. But I knew they had a lot of eyes on them. They were one of the top search engines for technology careers back in the day. They were kind of on their way down at this time. They were struggling, but they still had tons of eyes going to their website. So I approached them and said, hey, look, I'll write 2 500-word career pieces for you. I'll write 2 every month. What I want is a banner ad on your website, because I knew there were so many eyes there. And they did it. They agreed to that. And that led to additional traffic, quite a bit, coming to my website and buying my self-published, poorly edited, I might add, self-published book, or so-so edited. I don't want to say poorly edited, but could have been better. But a copy of my book was bought by a woman in San Francisco, personal email address. I certainly didn't know who she was. 2 weeks later, she contacted me. Her name is Mary Beth, and she is an executive editor for Cisco Press, which is part of Prentice Hall, which is really Pearson being a major, major publisher. And she told me she had bought my book, and she loved it, and she wanted to print it. She wanted to publish it. And so then we went through the process of rewriting and the editing, and I could talk about that another time. And the book dramatically changed between the time what she purchased and what they put out. It was much more polished, much more put together. I'm very thankful for working with that team. Hugely invaluable as an author to work with a professional team of editors and publicists and all those things. So my second book, we changed the title. We added several chapters, revamped the content. That led to this book here. Let me show you. So that's my most recent book through them, Building Your IT Career. Now, we changed the title because it was really hard to say the other title, and that's just what it comes down to. And there were some other kind of branding issues that were making it more difficult. But either way, it's really a second edition, but it's dramatically different, and there's a bevy of online content, things like that. But I got signed to write a consulting book for them and do a consulting video series, which I've not executed on. So that's a whole nother set of stories that we can talk about. But I wanted to point out the key elements of what I did to get published, and hopefully you can take some of that with you and apply it to your own writing. So if you're writing fiction, by the way, I've told people in many cases, look, writing fiction is more difficult to get published in. In the world out there, the bulk of content being released is nonfiction. I don't know. I heard like 90%. I don't know what the actual percentage is. You could probably look that up. But if you can write about a topic that you're knowledgeable about and get published through a major, one thing I can tell you is Pearson owns Penguin and several other imprints. It also led to a children's book that I got a publishing deal on through an imprint called Kids Play, which was part of Pearson. Once again, another story. We backed out of that deal. We still have that children's book, still working on it for a number of creative reasons. I don't recommend backing out of deals from publishers. If you want to get the major, imprint publishing cred, go with them. But I have a particular thing I'm trying to accomplish, so it might be foolhardy to take the approach I'm taking. Although I will tell you, somebody at the publisher, kind of a big executive said, I think you did the right decision in that case. But in any case, hopefully this sheds some light on some things you might do. So you want to create some brand awareness of you. And my recommendation is you find places that make sense, that give you exposure. So once again, this isn't, I say the same thing about interning for technology careers, and that'll become another video, where I get angry responses of people saying, oh, you're letting people take advantage of you. In no instance do I feel I was taken advantage of. I feel I was given great opportunity, and that yielded a result because I was intelligent about where I was exposing that content, where I was willing to write for free. So I'm not just saying do it for the sake of doing it. I'm saying pick and choose where you believe you can create your brand, and that's going to be what's critical. So hopefully you find that helpful. If you do, I'm going to do other videos like this, and advice about music or whatever else. I'd love for you to subscribe. That'd be awesome. There's a subscribe button. Just subscribe. It's going to make you healthier, happier, more beautiful, or something like that. Thanks.